Welcome to the Finding Gravitas podcast, brought to you by Gravitas Detroit. Looking to become a more authentic leader? Finding Gravitas is the podcast for you. Gravitas is the ultimate leadership quality that draws people in. It's an irresistible force encompassing all the traits of authentic leadership. Join your podcast host, Jan Griffiths, that passionate, rebellious farmer's daughter from Wales, entrepreneur, leadership coach, keynote speaker, one of the top 100 leading women in the automotive industry, as she interviews some of the finest leadership minds in the quest for gravitas.
It's Sunday, March 29th, 2020, and we're in the midst of a global crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. We're living either in isolation, shelter in place, or some form of quarantine. Only essential services are allowed to operate, and every business leader out there is figuring out what to do next amidst a sea of unknowns and uncertainty. And it seems that information and predictions of what and when will happen next are changing by the minute. Leaders are challenged with an unprecedented situation where there is no real corporate playbook to follow and very little evidence of contingency planning. Almost all employees are told to work from home, and every single routine we had a few weeks ago is now entirely changed and disrupted. Where can we look for guidance, for leadership insight in this time of crisis, this time of uncertainty? Who is ever really trained for this? The answer, the military. And we look to an elite group of warriors known as the Navy SEALs. In this episode, you'll meet Nick Norris, a man I met through a video conference just a few days ago. This man is nothing like what I expected. My first interaction with a Navy SEAL, I expected an aggressive command and control type who would talk about barking out orders and following them blindly. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nick is humble, kind, gracious, and more than willing to support the mission of authentic leadership and the quest for gravitas. Nick was clearly born to serve. He not only served his country as a Navy SEAL, but continues to serve the SEAL community with his active involvement with the C4 Foundation. The C4 Foundation honors the legacy of Charles Keating IV, a heroic Navy SEAL who gave his life defending our country and the freedoms we enjoy. The C4 provides support and resources through science-based programs to active duty Navy SEALs and their families. Nick also serves in his current role as CEO and co-founder of Protect Products, a wellness company committed to positively impacting customer health with both personal care products and nutritional supplements. Looking at the mission statement taken directly from its website, and I actually looked at this after I had interviewed Nick, and it says this: Protect wants you to get closer to exhilarating experiences and reveling in your element, uncompromised, undaunted. Protect is not about resistance, it's about acceptance. Living in the moment, not just stepping into the void, but leaping towards it. Having the trust, faith, and confidence to do so. We're not in the business of protection, we're in the business of freedom. And as I read that, I thought, that's exactly it. This statement not only embodies everything about the product, Nick embodies the qualities of his brand. And this is exactly the type of leadership we need right now. Leading through this crisis can be the most rewarding and, yes, exhilarating experience of our lifetime if we step up and step into it right now. Nick Norris is a graduate of both the United States Naval Academy and Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Buds Class 247. Upon completion of SEAL training in 2004, Nick assumed progressively higher positions of leadership within naval special warfare. His deployed roles included combat advisor to Iraqi and Afghan military units, cross-functional team leader, and ground force commander during combat operation in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Nick was most recently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Basic Training Command, SEAL qualification training as officer in charge prior to transitioning off active duty. Originally from Chicago, Nick received his Bachelor in Science from the United States Naval Academy in 2003 and his Master's of Science in Real Estate from the University of San Diego in 2013. And if that isn't enough, he's also a high-performance athlete who pushes the limits at every turn. Perhaps, most importantly, what really fuels him and drives his vision and mission, he is the proud husband and father of 2 young children. Nick Norris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
So, Nick, that was a rather long introduction and bio. Normally, I don't have a bio that's that lengthy, but it's great to have you on the show. And I could not think of a better guest to have on the show to talk about leading through crisis. But before we get to that, what's your story really? Who are you, Nick Norris?
Well, we covered it a little bit in the bio, but I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. I went to a private all-boys Catholic school for high school. And, I think prior to that is when I was first introduced to the SEAL teams in concept. I had a good friend that I grew up with that was really into the military. Personally, I think he really had an affinity for the United States Marine Corps. And in a conversation early as kids, he mentioned to me that there was this unit called the SEAL teams, and they were elite, and it was very difficult to be part of. And I think at that point, I fixated on that as this lofty kind of ambitious goal as a young man. So from that point forward, my goal was to, get to basic underwater demolition SEAL training and successfully complete it and join the ranks of our U.S. Navy SEAL team. So that took me to the Naval Academy for my undergrad. I finished there in 2003. And then I spent a little over 10 years with the SEAL teams to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, conducting combat operations on behalf of our wonderful nation. And, finally decided to transition off to active duty after, running our training command for about 2.5 or 3 years. So that kind of got me to transition. Since transition, I've had a number of different experiences, but namely, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been involved with a couple different startup consumer packaged goods companies, and most recently founded a new company, Protect Products, that is focused in the wellness space, both personal and nutritional supplements. So I glossed over kind of a lot of that. We'll get into it, I'm sure, during this conversation, but that gets you to present day Nick Norris.
Great. Well, Nick, given your experience as a Navy SEAL, you are no stranger to dangerous environments, to uncertainty, walking into situations where there perhaps isn't a playbook. And, here we are today where a lot of leaders in the corporate world are faced with, I'll say, a similar situation, right? They just don't know exactly what's going to come at them from one day to the next. And I'm curious, what prepares you for that type of leadership? What kind of training, what's going on in your head? What prepares you to be a great leader in a crisis situation?
So, it's funny. I think right now people are being tested immensely. And I think the first thing that's being tested is do they have solid contingency plans? And throughout my training, the whole goal during SEAL training, both as a student and as a SEAL, because we never stop training when we're working up as a full blown SEAL, part of a platoon. You are constantly training, and you always are working on your contingency planning to be prepared for these uncertain times. Because the best way to inoculate you to stress is by presenting you with a tremendous amount of stress at all times, and always presenting you with uncertainty. So, in simplest terms, the SEAL teams, prepare, Navy SEALs so well because, we're constantly being stress inoculated during all of our training. We're presented with training scenarios that are not only difficult, but very difficult to prepare for. The goal of our training cadre is to present uncertainty all the time. So you always have to be thinking on your feet, and you need to be ready, willing, and capable of executing contingency plans, which, really contingency planning is the only way that you can prepare for uncertain times, because you're pre-planning kind of your playbook that you can reach into, not knowing what problem you're truly going to be presented with.
The corporate leadership playbook handbook doesn't have a chapter in it for what's happening today. And I believe, as you all know, my whole mission is authentic leadership. And this is a time where the real authentic leaders and the people that can connect with their teams, it's a great opportunity for them to step up. It could be the most rewarding leadership experience of their lifetimes. But they might be feeling some level of fear and anxiety in stepping up and taking the lead in this type of environment. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think this is an opportunity to embrace. There's a lot of people that ask the question, what makes Navy SEALs or SEAL teams or any special operations unit so effective? And the first thing that I will always point to is the camaraderie, right? The brotherhood, that deep sense of team that exists within a SEAL unit. And I think that is the lifeblood of our community, and it's what's led to tremendous success, over decades of combat. So if you look at what we're being presented as a society right now, in the current day with this pandemic, there's a great opportunity for leaders to embrace this as a shared struggle. A shared struggle. And I'm not saying your people need to be the ones that are struggling, or the leaders by themselves need to struggle. It should be shared. You need to be willing as a leader to kind of dig in and go through this together. And if you truly embrace that as an opportunity, I think it's going to galvanize the bonds that can lead to these kind of mystical cultures that every corporate leader aspires to kind of model their company after. If you want to create a SEAL platoon in your company right now, embrace the hardship that we're dealing with right now that's upon us.
Nick, I think there's a tendency in the corporate world right now to shift into a very hard, aggressive command and control type leadership style, because people don't want to come across as being weak. They want to show their people that they're in charge. And it could be in some situations a sort of knee-jerk reaction to move more closely into command and control. And as I look at the military, which is, as you and I both know, a field that I don't know much about, I always thought that would be very much command and control type of environment, right? Where, you had this sort of guy who was in charge, this commander who was barking out orders at people, and then everybody just follows. And I read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and really nothing could be further from the truth. I had it all wrong, didn't I? So could you explain a little bit about that command and control, and why perhaps people shouldn't move necessarily into this strong command and control, and how should they lead through this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if you go into a micromanagement type leadership construct, as you're describing with a command and control structure, you are really handicapping yourself as a leader. As a leader, you basically are then taking on all roles and saying, you know what, I know best. I know everyone's role best, and I'm going to tell you how to do your job perfect. And I don't think you can point at a single individual that knows how to do every single job in an organization perfectly or better than any individual in that organization. So, from a SEAL's perspective, I recognize that immediately. I came into the SEAL teams as a young officer with zero combat experience, zero workup experience. And I had guys in my platoon that had done 3, 4, 5, combat tours and had worked up for a decade prior to me joining them. So, I would be insane to think that that I know how to place snipers better than my snipers. I know how to communicate via a radio and get communications up better than my radio man. And then I know how to administer medical care better than the corpsman, the combat medic that's attached to us. So we embrace the fact that every single person is a leader in their own right, and they're an expert in their own category. And we allow them to take charge. As a leader, I want my people to lead. I want them to take ownership of their job and their responsibility in an operation. And I want them to flourish. And I want them to be the person that I can rely on, because I'm not going to be there all the time. And, guess what? As a leader, as the ground force commander, or let's say the CEO in the corporate world, I need to be looking up and out. I need to be, looking at the problem from the 50,000 foot view, not from the ground level. And if I'm going to do that competently and quickly, which every leader is expected to do, then I need to rely on my people to execute, on their own and be confident in their ability to lead as individuals. And, that's what makes, a unit like the SEAL team so successful, is because, we applaud everybody's strengths. We want them to be leaders in their own right. And we know our role and we know our responsibilities, and we execute in our lane.
Very well said. And in the corporate world today, many leaders would, if you ask them, do you delegate appropriately? And do you respect the strengths of your team? And most of them would say yes. But then the reality is very, very different. And when you
it's scary, right?
It is indeed. It is indeed. And it comes down to, it's a fear and it's a lack of trust. And I see it playing out now in a very simple thing. I'm talking to a Navy SEAL has been in life and death situations. And this may sound comical, but this is where it plays out, right? All of a sudden, people have to work from home. And a lot of leaders and managers and even CEOs out there are terrified because they don't know how to manage that. And the trust isn't there in some cases. So I've even heard of a company that has asked people to take photographs of themselves working from home, or even I believe there's some sort of keyboard tracker that tracks how much time you're on a keyboard. Talk about lack of trust. So you're literally in life and death situations as a Navy SEAL. So you have to trust people, and you're delegating the responsibility for certain jobs. How do you get to that point where you can trust everybody on your team as a leader? How do you get there?
Well, we start our career as SEALs going through an extremely intense period of training. That's our shared struggle. We go through Hell Week during that initial selection training, and it's a very difficult physical test. And I think that shared struggle and that shared pain forces you to trust people, and people's true character shines through. When you're put in a stressful situation and you need to look and rely upon the person to your left and the person to your right, you have to present who you are. There's no hiding at that point. So I think that this is an opportunity for people to kind of go through that. But regardless of the kind of the scenario, whether it's stressful or totally benign, I think it's every leader's responsibility to really dig in and get to know the people that are working with them. You shouldn't treat employees as just cogs in the wheel. If you truly get to know them and they believe that you care about them, because you should care about them, and they know that you have their back, they're going to reciprocate, 9 times out of 10. That's just human dynamics. We respond to love. We respond to compassion. We know when people care about us, and we know when people don't care about us. Everybody's been in those situations where you meet somebody or you're interacting with somebody in a relationship, and we all are very in tune with whether or not somebody is truly listening to us and truly wants to get to know us and be a good kind of partner and kind of good teammate. And I think that's where very, very solid teams are built in kind of caring and loving for each other, and in that trust is built. And if you get pushed in the situation that we're in right now, you don't have to worry about how much keyboard time somebody's putting in, or you want them to take pictures of themselves at home. I mean, those are probably the worst things you could do. You talk about further eroding trust. You're basically telling them, I don't trust you at all. I can't wait until this is over. And then I can't wait till I put you back in the office and I can watch over you and mandate, what you're doing every moment of the day.
Yeah, and get back to their comfort zone, and to fit the corporate mold that they have determined for themselves. And many corporate leaders will definitely put a line between themselves and their employees. And I will be totally honest and tell you that for many years in my corporate career, I thought that you were supposed to keep a distance with the people on your team. And then I learned over time that was dead wrong. And the more authentic and the more open I became, and the more human I became and connected with people at a very deep and meaningful level, then the tighter the team became and stronger. And it wasn't seen as being a weakness. I think a lot of leaders think that when you try to connect at that human level, that's a weakness. It's not. So I want to hear it from a Navy SEAL for every corporate leader out there that is not a weakness.
No, not at all. I mean, I truly, I tell friends of mine that I've served with in combat that I love them, and I'm not afraid to say that ever. I've said that to some of the most hardened individuals, and there's a lot harder people out there that came from my community than I. And, I will get that response back, because it's meant. And those are the bonds that you want within a team that's going to be a high performing team. And I tell you right now that, talk about a great situation to build trust. As a leader, who you have that are the leaders working in your organization. And if you can give them your trust and your confidence right now during this hard time, and challenge them to grow their facet of the organization and show performance and success in the most austere environment that we've seen probably for a century. I think you could really set your company up for success and skyrocket once we get past this pandemic scare.
I couldn't agree with you more. This is the corporate world's version of Hell Week, right? This is it.
Corporations are going to war right now.
Yes.
And they're going to, right now we're seeing who did a good job of building trust and rapport in their team, and who's been micromanaging.
Yeah, that's true. One of the hallmarks of a great authentic leader, and indeed is one of the traits behind gravitas, is this ability to bring calm into a stressful situation. And that doesn't mean deny what's going on, run away from it, sugarcoat it, but to bring calm. So as you look at the corporate leaders out there, what would you say to help them maybe address some of the initial conversations with their team around this crisis?
Yeah, so calm breeds calm, right? It's contagious. and you see that on the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, panic breeds panic. Um, I'd like to share something, Jana, and I thought about this the other day, kind of, leading up to this conversation. It always was so impressive to me to listen to the way pilots, jet fighter pilots that we interfaced with as, kind of combat units on the ground, how calm, cool, and collected those pilots were every time we were on the radio with them. And it kind of put you at ease. When you're on the ground, we be in gunfights on the ground, and you're interfacing, with either an F-18 or even, a helicopter pilot like an Apache gunship. And, you're pretty stressed, right? You're being shot at, you're shooting back, you're redlined, and you get on the radio with one of these pilots and they're just cool and calm as could be. And it actually would like ratchet your, your level of anxiety down like multiple notches. So that, for me, that was proof of concept. And it's something that, I personally put into practice, in stressful scenarios, as a SEAL, and, even leaving the SEAL teams. I've really tried to, physically portray my emotions in a way that, it actually breeds that same calm reaction from the people that I'm trying to communicate to. So I think there's a lot of power in the way a leader communicates, especially right now. And if, you can, take a step back, stop, think, and then speak, instead of just, going and, rattling off a bunch of orders and sounding frantic. I think it can make a big difference in the way that your people receive your guidance as the leader in charge.
Yes. And as you know, I'm a huge supporter of turn those cameras on, people, when you're on those video calls, right? And that's and that's because you need to be seen, visibly seen. People need to see the calm in your eyes, in your face, in your facial expressions, in your body language. Everything is communicating out. 55% of communication is body language, and people need to see that. 38% is the tone of your voice. So when you're going through a video conferencing medium, that all needs to be portrayed and thought about ahead of time. And then I think you're right, it is infectious, right? So people will calm, and then they're able to focus, and then you're able to move forward. I also think that this is a great opportunity, not only from a leadership and a bonding and developing trust perspective, but I think it's a great opportunity to tap into creativity, because now the rules are different. Right, the corporate playbook is not there anymore. The rules are very, very different. So you can play around a little bit with the creativity side of it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's awesome. I think this is it. You have nothing to lose right now, right? Your organization is completely decentralized, and it's outside of your control. So I think empowering your people to come up with strategies to lead and inspire their people now is an awesome opportunity. Jan and I had a conversation offline, and I actually I thought it was pretty awesome how she shared that she used to make her people get up and dance a little bit before they would engage with her at core meetings. And I think it's good. I think it takes the edge off. There's in my personal experience, a lot of SEALs will rely on humor to combat stress. And, I can tell you there's so much humor that goes on in SEAL training and throughout workups and deployments. It's constant joking around and kind of lightheartedness, because, if you can't do that, you can't be redlined and stressed and kind of serious all the time, or as human beings we just start falling apart. So I think that if you can add a little bit of happiness and some humor and lightheartedness to your day, and push that out to your people, the easiest way to do it is you got your video on the next conference call. How about just smile instead of just being stone faced the entire time?
Yes.
It definitely makes a big difference. People smile. You walk down the street, smile at somebody, and you usually will get somebody to smile back at you. I think that's a pretty powerful tool.
That's so true. And we actually had a call this morning with a team. It's a global team. It's a call in that we have. And this poor guy, you can hear it in his voice. He's stressing out because he's trying to do his job, manage his team, and he's also got his wife at home and his 2-year-old, right? And I explained to him, I said, you know what? Now is the time. It's okay for the 2-year-old to run into the room and jump on your lap in the middle of a conference call, right? For the dog to bark. It's okay. And it will actually make you more human and more relatable as a leader. This is the time to break that corporate mold and just be who you are.
Oh, man, couldn't agree with you more. I actually had my little boy run into a conference call this morning, and actually you could hear everybody light up on the call, because you know what? They were like, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that has, toddlers running in and out of the room trying to get their toys.
Exactly. And we don't need all that stress. This is why authentic leaders will really lean into this opportunity a lot easier. They'll make the shift a lot easier than leaders, who perhaps sit in a very rigid corporate mold. And I am thrilled to see it develop, to see it unravel, as we go through this crisis.
Yeah, it usually is just personal insecurity, right? I mean, you have to be secure with yourself to be comfortable to show emotion, especially to your team, right? If you're expected to be a leader, everybody assumes, that, the leader is supposed to be this stoic individual. But, the most inspiring leaders that I've ever learned from have shown emotion at the appropriate time. And, when it's not appropriate, they are the stone-faced killers that they need to be. And, but the most powerful, interactions with those people are typically when they actually show the emotion. When I've seen, I've seen, totally stoic SEAL leaders, admirals, shed tears for me when it's appropriate for them to shed tears. Nothing more powerful in the world to be able to see somebody that you respect to that degree be willing to be vulnerable and show emotion. And that's kind of the extreme and kind of, the shedding of tears and sharing grief. But, any emotion that you can share with your team, I think it humanizes you, and it makes them, want to connect with you and feel comfortable with you.
And I think that's so powerful coming from you as a Navy SEAL with the background that you've had, to be able to speak to that. Because we all, we read the books, we read the posts on LinkedIn about vulnerability. But I think it's hard to understand the balance, because you said it, right? There's a time to be in charge and in control, because people need to know that the leader knows where to take the team and where we're going and has a plan. And there's a time to be vulnerable. I mean, to step up to the mic or on a video recording, a video conference today in this time of crisis and go, oh, I'm really scared too. I don't know what to do either, would not be the right level of vulnerability, right? That's not right. But to share about, what, this is, I'm very concerned about my family too, about my financial situation, about what's happening. That's a level of vulnerability. But then follow that with, however, we're going to pull this together as a team, and so on and so forth. So, talk a little bit about that balance of vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, balance is key, right? I mean, you're in control of your own emotions. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly that you need to be able to show emotion when it's appropriate to show emotion. But, and that's really to, just be a human being, connect with people, and when it's not appropriate, people are looking up to you to be that rock of stability in the organization. So, you need to be able to tell people, I am a human being, but I'm also the person that's going to lead you out of this mess. And I'm confident that I know what I'm doing, and I'm confident that my plan is going to be successful, because as a team, we're all going to pull together and we're going to make it work. I mean, one of the first lessons I learned as a young officer was to exude confidence. So it didn't matter if you had kind of the 50% solution as far as a plan, goes. if I was able to brief that plan with the highest level of confidence, and confidence comes in the form of the inflection in my voice, my ability to make eye contact with people, and just the way that I can seamlessly roll through a plan and give people orders that are in my organization. People they eat that up, and they become confident. They believe that what you got going and what you're doing, and it allows them to execute with total confidence and no uncertainty. So I think that's something that I have taken to heart. And when it's time to put orders out and when it's time to get things done, you need to speak confidently. Nobody likes a meek leader. We ate people alive in the SEAL community, that were meek, and even people that were, phenomenal tacticians that, had, very intelligent, knew what they were doing tactically. If they couldn't present plans and lead with some authority and confidence, typically they fell apart, or they needed to rely on somebody else in their organization that was willing to step up and be that, kind of authoritative, confident, kind of order giver. So it may not be the CEO in an organization. It might be, the COO, or it could be one of your, kind of senior managers that in a crisis situation, maybe they're the right personality to be stepping up and kind of taking charge and, putting out the commander's intent, that the CEO needs to be put out to the people.
You remind me of the significance of being able to paint a picture of success. When you're talking about speaking with confidence, I totally understand that. But there's another piece to that, and that is being able to describe what's at the end, what success looks like and feels like. So talk to us about how do you do that in a Navy SEAL kind of, in a military kind of environment, because people really, that resonates with people so much. You've got to have this bone deep commitment to the success of the mission, whether it's Navy SEAL or whether it's a getting through this crisis or whether it's a project in the corporate world. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when we first kicked off the conversation, I mentioned contingency planning. And, I will tell you that is the backbone of kind of SEAL mission planning, as I was brought up in the community. I was mentored underneath Jocko Willink. I always looked up to Jocko. I was fortunate enough to go through training under his tutelage and actually served at SEAL Team 3 while Jocko was a troop commander. So, he preached contingency planning. And we used to use a device called a sand table, and you could make it. It's basically a mock-up of kind of the target area. You could use a map or a computer screen that's projected up as your sand table. But we used to look at that, and we used to have each and every one of our kind of element leaders. So I call them like kind of your lower level managers, brief their portion of the operation, and then talk through kind of everything that they could possibly think of that could go wrong at each phase of the operation and how they're going to combat those things as they do present themselves. So in order to paint that picture of kind of, extreme optimism as you're briefing, I think it's important that everybody believes that, not just believes, they know that they have put the time and the energy into the planning. They know what to do if things do go wrong. They already have the playbook. It's like you've already been able to read the answer key prior to taking the test. I mean, it's what any high-end sports team does. Do you think a Super Bowl team goes into the final game without the ability to call audibles on the line? Absolutely not. Good leaders and good teams go into crises and deal with crises with contingency planning. I think it's the only way that you can paint that picture. I mean, if not, you're really just painting a rosy picture that's built on, toothpicks instead of, good lumber.
Yeah, no, well said. And it's this idea of visualization, and I like the way that you described that sand table where people are talking through their piece of it and what could go wrong. So mentally, they've already overcome that whatever could go wrong because they've already talked through it. So when it happens, they've already been there once in their mind, so it's much easier to push through it. I totally agree. And also this idea of high performance athletes and the visualization process. They go through mental affirmation. We know this. I've only been studying that for maybe the past year, but I'm fascinated with it. And they say that a lot of these high performance athletes, really the mental portion of this visualization process and the ability to continuously do that is far more important than perhaps, the skill set that they have.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if you're a professional, and I don't care if it's a professional athlete, you're a professional in the business world, you have the skill sets, you're as capable as the next person. But the difference between you and the people that truly excel in that profession is their ability to control their emotions, control their mind, and visualize, accurately and truly commit to that visualization process. I mean, I can speak to it. I mean, the sand table exercise is truly just kind of an embodiment of visualization, and it's kind of taking it to the next level, as an athlete, specifically as a climber, so for bouldering, I'm talking about climbing small pieces of rock, that are just very technically difficult. And it's like putting together a little puzzle. You have to figure out body position and movement, and little minuscule variances in body position, the way that you put your foot on a certain chip of rock, the way that you grab a certain hold, the way that you move, the way that you generate your power. All of that stuff matters in order to successfully climb that piece of rock. And before I go and I'm going to send something, and something that I've been working on for a long time, I physically, I close my eyes, I sit in front of the boulder, and I will physically, I will move my hands with my eyes closed, visualizing kind of how I'm moving myself across the surface of that stone. And, typically it works. It's crazy how much more efficient you become. And then if you can take that and kind of, project it on a larger scale into kind of your everyday life and your professional life, it can be a very powerful thing. I shared with you the other day, Jan, that I've adopted meditation this past year, thanks to my friend Tim Ferriss. He's the guy that kind of kicked off that practice, and I'll probably be forever indebted to him for it. But, meditation is a great way, for anybody, and then specifically leaders, in this day and age, to be able to visualize, kind of the problems that they're going to surmount that day, and, maybe the contingencies that they need to go through, as they're going through what we're dealing with.
Yes, this whole process and idea of visualization, I actually wrote a blog on it about a month ago because I'm a firm believer that we need to bring more of that into the corporate world. We tend to look at our objectives and, in this crisis situation, we look up at the mountain, right? So we look up at all these things we have to do. And if we would just put ourselves on the top of the mountain and really understand what that looks like and feels like to succeed, and then look down and map the path, it becomes much, much easier. And I think that's hard for people in the corporate world to understand that. And I've done it several times where I have put myself out there. I did it with a major OEM customer when I worked in the supply base, and stood there in front of them, in front of many, many people with my team behind me, and made a commitment to launch a project on time, to budget, and we would be the example of how to launch that project. Now, did I have all the plans and all the pieces, worked out so that I could make that claim? No, but what I had was bone deep commitment and a sense of visualization of what that would look like and feel like to bind the team together. And guess what? We did it. And it had
Yeah.
never been done before. So I'm a huge believer in it, and I really want to bring that into the corporate world. And it's very powerful for us to hear that from you, from really two different angles, in your military career and also with your experience in this high-performance athletic world that you're also in.
Yeah, I mean, it is a powerful thing. I mean, you know, it gets me thinking about even being a young kid. When I was in seventh grade, I latched on to the concept, of being a SEAL, and I didn't just think it was like, oh, that would be an interesting thing to do. I fully believed, and I visualized myself, serving in an elite military unit, and that I mean, it set me on a course that altered my life. Because I firmly believed that I would make that happen. So it was without question. I was going to succeed and I was going to do all of the things that I needed to be done in order to achieve that goal, because I couldn't imagine a reality where I don't achieve it and I don't assume that role that I could envision myself, being in. So, I mean, it probably started when I was a little guy. Now, I mean, it's interesting thinking about this during our conversation, because I really haven't, thought of it in that context, but yeah, it's been part of my life for a long time.
And that's exactly the type of commitment and ability that the leaders have to have today as we work through this crisis, is this bone deep commitment to, we're going to get through this, and this is what success looks like. And when this is over, team, we're going to do this and this and this. It might be we're going to celebrate, I don't know, we're going to repaint the office. And I don't know what it is. It's going to be different for everybody, right? But there should be a milestone and an event and a picture or something that everybody can relate to that marks that moment of success that they're all marching towards, and that everybody has a piece of that. And that confidence and commitment has to come through from the leader. And it is the truly authentic leaders that will step up and deliver that message powerfully, I believe, now in this crisis.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what? Along the way, there's going to be those toxic individuals that are going to tell you that's impossible. You can't do it. Or they'll try to undermine your efforts, right? There'll be a cancer within the organization or within your social circle. And, for some reason, they live to be the one that's naysaying. And, I'll tell you, in my personal life, I mean, I got good to kind of tuning that distraction and that noise out and staying focused on what I was visualizing for myself. And, I've seen that, throughout my time in the military, and then even after the military, finding, kind of those, poor attitudes, and confronting them face on, and don't ignore them. They won't go away, as easy as that would be, and everybody would love them to go away. I think your ability, as an individual and as a leader, to be able to confront those points of resistance, understand their perspective, really try to win them over, and bring them into your camp. But if you put that energy in and you give them a shot and they still want to go down the track that's going to be counter to the way that you need them to be rowing as part of your team, it's always best to kind of cut them loose and remove them from your life and from your organization.
Yes, and we see that quite a bit in the corporate world. One of the things I really love about Gary Vaynerchuk is that he talks a lot about how to handle toxic employees, in that you cannot tolerate them in your business, even when they are considered to be your highest performing individuals, because they will destroy the team. So given that, Nick, the fact that this toxic person could be the highest performing employee, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, nobody is more important than the team and the mission, right? So I have personally had to deal with this, and it's never easy. And, specifically, for me, I'm a person that loves to place my trust in people. I'm a very loyal person. I trust that people are going to do the right thing and have my best interest at heart. So it's never easy for me to sit somebody down and actually have to, I guess come to the realization that, that's not the case. So I have let it go too long, and I've watched the consequences of that inaction, truly dismantle organizations. I mean, I can tell you, I've seen it in the military with bad leaders, leaders that were identified in training or in workup as a problem. And, other leaders above them said, no, you know what, I can fix that person. I'm going to make them right. They're too valuable. And then they drag them out on deployment. And then lo and behold, when you are in a crisis scenario and you're decentralized, which is the optimal way to lead, that person most likely will let you down. And you're not going to be there to look over their shoulder. And you're not going to be over there to hold their hand and show them the right way or to do it yourself. And it can lead to catastrophe. So, I've through some of those errors, I've learned to, have those tough conversations, immediately, let people know where they're starting to, make mistakes and where their attitude is setting the entire organization astray. And if they don't want to get on board, it's time for them to go. And, it's nothing personal. It's just not a good fit for them. And if they're not a good fit for the organization, then they need to go because nobody is more important than that.
Yeah, and you have to step up to that decision. And people in the organization will respect you as a leader when you step up to that decision because everybody knows it. You may think that you're hiding it or people don't know, but they all know, right? They all know that this guy or gal is particularly toxic. And I think it's very refreshing and it's the right thing to do when you step up and take action. So, Nick, you've had a lot of leadership experience, obviously, but as you moved out of the military environment into the world of being an entrepreneur, what leadership skills from your military background served you well being an entrepreneur, and which ones perhaps did not?
Well, I mean, I think, we just talked about it. I'll start with the ones that didn't serve me well, even though I consider them very core to who I am. Freely giving trust, giving trust to the point where it's almost to the detriment of, decisions that I've made. So I've been very free in that capacity because I came from an organization where, fortunately, we vetted most, if not all, the people that I was serving with. They had to go through a very difficult shared struggle and selection process where, I can place my trust freely in everybody because they've already proven themselves in that capacity. And now sometimes there was that one person or maybe a couple people that slipped through the cracks and kind of made it through, but it was very rare. So I've had to learn to be a bit more discerning and calculated in when I place total trust and when I place total confidence. And I think in kind of the civilian world, and especially the entrepreneurial world, you need to allow people to prove themselves to you over a period of time. And you got to slowly but surely give them kind of the responsibility before you completely let go of the reins. So I have been tempered a bit, and a lot of that has come through some unfortunate situations where it's definitely caught me off guard. And, I probably let people remain in an organization, far too long, and it wastes time, resources, and, frankly puts an emotional strain on everybody. And, I was going to say this before, it's the one time it's really very appropriate for the leader to step up and take ownership is, to have that conversation with that person, never push that off on somebody else. And if you do push it off on somebody else, make sure that you make a point of sitting with that person, point to point as the ultimate one accountable, and have a face-to-face conversation, because everybody around you will see that. And the last thing you want is to think that you're pushing your problems off on somebody else and you're not, confident enough or capable enough to make that decision yourself.
Yes. Well said. Let's talk about your athletic accomplishments. what drives you into these extreme sports? Could you tell us a little bit about what you're into and why you're so engaged into this extreme level of athletic performance?
Yeah, so I think it's, the thing that captured my attention early on, about, both climbing and, ultra distance, activities, whether they be ultra running or adventure racing, was the mental aspect of the sport. I never considered myself kind of the best athlete, like the most talented, the most genetically gifted person. I was the kid that played like an inning and a half in baseball because I was terrible. I couldn't hit the ball, I couldn't catch. I wasn't a basketball player. So I took to wrestling because I could just work really hard. If I was in really good shape, I can build my mental toughness, and even if I wasn't the most athletically gifted wrestler, I can gut it out, and you can wear people down. And leaving wrestling behind, I found climbing as a young man at the Naval Academy, and I had a couple upperclassmen, juniors, that took me under their wing and kind of showed me the sport. And, it was intriguing to me because I was in good shape, right? I lifted weights. I was a big runner. I was training to be a SEAL or go through training. But it humbled me immediately. It was just so difficult to see improvement. And the improvement came through kind of very small, incremental kind of gains. So there was a huge mental kind of component to the sport. I had to really be in control of my body, had to be in control of my mind, my breathing. And, I think that, that discipline kind of mental component of climbing is what attracted me to it. And then with like ultra running, again, I wasn't the guy that was going to win the 10K. I'm not the speedy cross country runner. But I really appreciated the long distance races where it became less of, how fast are you? It was more, how tough are you? How much pain can you endure? Are you willing to forego more sleep than the other person and continue to slog it out, over uneven terrain in the dark, with a map and compass, and like I appreciated the races that were longer. The longer the race got, the more kind of in tune I was with myself, and the more successful I thought I could be. So I think they were kind of foundational portions of my life that prepped me to have the grit that I ultimately relied on as I went through training in the SEAL teams and took groups into combat.
And you participated in the Adventure Racing World Championship in 2007, right?
Yeah, we didn't. We definitely did not win. I was invited to race with actually one of my teammates and I were invited to race with a husband and wife. And we were very fortunate to get those slots. And we traveled to Fort William, Scotland, and we raced all over the Scottish Highlands in I think it was probably spring, summer of 2007. So beautiful, beautiful country. Lots of wet weather. It was very cold and miserable. So it was actually very, it reminded me a lot of going through SEAL training. And it was probably as miserable as I was during SEAL training, because if you've ever been to the Scottish Highlands and you've been in like a Scottish bog area, there's nothing around you for like, 20, 30 kilometers. So the only thing you could do is like suck it up, deal with the fact that you're freezing cold and soaking wet, and like continue to, kind of slog forward until you could get to the end. So, very awesome experience, but, definitely humbled every time I did those things with, at how fast some of those leading teams and those athletes were able to accomplish kind of the course in, because we definitely remained on the course a lot longer.
Well, that's incredible. So here's something I have to ask you. When you're pushing yourself to these levels, there's always that voice in our head, right, that tells us I can't go any further, right? And
Sure.
I have experienced it. I had a limiting belief in my head for most of my life that said that I couldn't run. And then I actually started working out in a gym, and there was a treadmill component to that. And a colleague of mine encouraged me to run a 5K. I'd never run a race in my life. And this was just a few years ago. And then I did it. I was terrified. And she put a medal on me and she said, see, you ran a race, therefore you're a runner. And it completely, blew that sort of limiting belief away. But then there are limits that I know they're in my head. I know I can run further than that. I know I can push myself further than that. But this story comes into my head of, maybe your breathing is a bit tight right now, or you've reached your limit, so you're good. So how do you get a hold of that narrative that's running in your head and push through that limiting belief so that you can get to this extreme level of performance? Get us inside your head.
Yeah, it's incremental. I have always approached very difficult tasks in bite-sized pieces. So, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the concept of something difficult, but it's very, very, palatable to be able to say, I can do this little bit. And that little bit is going to get me a little closer to realizing my goal. I'll take it back to climbing. I'm a shorter individual, and I weigh a lot more than typical, higher end climbers that are my height. I'm 160 pounds and like 5'5.5" or something. So, I'm already constrained, based on my height and weight from performing at like the highest levels. But, I've made a commitment to myself years ago that, I can always get my fingers stronger, and I can do hangboard workouts, and I can stay disciplined, and I can make sure that I knock them out every single day. And in the course of a year, my fingers got stronger, and I was actually able to hold on and kind of manage my weight better and actually accomplish things that I thought were impossible a year prior. So, taking things in small bite-sized pieces has always been kind of the way that I approach, my athletic pursuits. And it's the way that I'm pursuing life, and there's a lot of things that, everybody has good days and bad days. And, there's a lot of things in my life that I still struggle with, and, I'm trying to get better at. And the only way I can do that is kind of managing, kind of my day to day, and kind of doing the right things I need to do on a daily basis. And, for my personal life, I told you I adopted meditation a year ago. I think meditation has been a phenomenal way for me to kind of break through some barriers, personal and emotional barriers that, I thought, for the longest time, I would struggle with for the rest of my life. And, I'm a happier person. I feel like I'm a more capable person than I used to be. And, it all started with, some simple 10-minute guided meditation, with, I use Sam Harris's Waking Up app, and, baby steps, now I feel like I have a very personalized meditation practice that, is exactly what I need from it, because it's different for every person. But, I'm already seeing kind of, it's bearing, fruit now, and it's really helping me become a better version of myself.
And how you start your day and the mindset that you have when you start your day is very, very important. And actually something that I picked up from Extreme Ownership from the book was this idea of not hitting the snooze button, right? So when you get up in the morning, you make a personal commitment to yourself that I'm going to get up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. or whatever time it is, and you get up, and that's how you start your day. So you're programming your mind for success and achievement rather than giving yourself an excuse. And then when you make that commitment, and then you load on top of that, spending some time really thinking about mindset and who you are and where you want to go and what's going on in your life through the process of meditation, then you really are setting yourself up for success. So share with us, what's your morning routine?
So my morning routine now is I wake up, I make every effort. The first thing I do before I look at my phone or any of that stuff, it's, I sit up, upright and I meditate. Currently, I'm meditating. I have some specific music that I've been meditating to. Hasn't always been that way, but I try to meditate for 20 plus minutes. And some days it's longer if I can do it. If some days it's a little shorter, but that really starts me off on the right foot. And when I finish my meditation, I especially with this current lockdown, I make a point of kind of going in and giving my daughter a kiss on the forehead, and able to just kind of enjoy the fact that I get to be a parent, and I have such beautiful little ones that are at the house. So it's really appreciation for that. And then I think I may have mentioned this in previous interviews, but I'm a big fan of hydration. I try to drink 2 pints of water, spaced out a little bit in the morning, first thing. And I have a very specific kind of, few supplements that I take. I take a lion's mane supplement. I take a B12 supplement. It's specific for me, but B12 and D3, it helps support everything that I'm doing. And I think it helps prime me for better sleep. And I take fish oil, and I also take niacin as well. I think it's really because I really enjoy the niacin flush. I'm one of those weird people out there that enjoy kind of that warm feeling that you get when you take a few 100 milligrams of niacin. So, that gets me going. I think it primes me to, the hydration definitely primes me to perform better. I'm more clear-minded throughout the day, being better hydrated. I regulate my weight better with better hydration, so my body doesn't retain as much fluid. And, at the end of the day, I think early morning light in combination with the hydration and, my vitamin D supplementation, I think it primes me for more restful sleep, because I'm a firm believer that sleep and hydration are kind of the core pillars of any kind of successful, healthy life.
Yes. And of course, I'm sure there's some exercise in there somewhere, right?
Climbing is my life. So my exercise revolves around my hobby now. I've really built it that way. My exercise for me is all geared towards performance as a boulder, and I'm not going out to win any competitions or be on the cover of any magazine. It's a personal endeavor that I'm firmly committed to, because it's a disciplined practice where, I feel rewarded when I do see these incremental gains. So I have a 50-degree home wall in the backyard. So an overhanging bouldering wall that's about 13 feet tall. And I do a lot of my training back there. And then my garage, I have a bunch of different fingerboards, and I have rings. So I do a lot of body weight exercises and core routines in the garage. So very simple, but effective for what my pursuit is.
Well, and it sets up your whole day, right? And
for sure,
a lot of people have lost their daily routines now in this crisis situation. And there's a tendency to want to maybe sit in front of the TV and be gripped by CNN and the death counter, which, I think is awful, right? And but I think, a lot of people have gone through this emotional roller coaster, and they've lost their routine. And so their routine is all changed, and they have to get a new routine back. And one of the things that I started doing last week, I launched an accountability clinic, and it's open for anybody. So we're on at 6:30 in the morning, and it's a Zoom call, so we can all see each other, and we have to do 3 things. 1, personal commitment for the day. So you talk about incremental. This isn't about making some big commitment to a project or all of a sudden you're going to be a long distance runner by next week. This is not what this is about. This is exactly what you say. It's incremental improvement. So every day, 1 personal commitment, whether it's yoga, go for a walk, 1 business commitment, and then 1 word to describe your mindset for the day. These calls are 20 minutes, and we go through it. And it's amazing to see just in this short period of time, we've just finished our first week today, how people have just changed. You can see it in their faces. A lot of the stress has gone. They're more productive, and they're setting their day off the right way. So I'm a huge supporter of understanding what that routine is, what you want it to be. And we all know that you can change a habit in 66 days. Now, I don't know if we're going to be out of this in 66 days, but if there's a habit that you want to start, now is a good time to start it. Now is the opportunity, because your normal treadmill life has changed, right?
You know what? What's going on right now is it's terrible. And there's a lot of people enduring a lot of hardship, but I've embraced it as an opportunity to live without distraction. I have the things that I love more than anything else in the world surrounding me every waking moment, my little boy and my little girl and my wife. And it's a time for me to really focus on connection with them. I've learned to juggle kind of phone calls and emails and everything that we typically do at the office. I've learned to kind of fully intertwine it with my life. And I feel, I'm living a fuller version of my life. It's like, I think a lot of people are probably realizing that if they're really embracing this situation, they may realize that, hey, maybe I can find a way to be more connected with my family and really, relish the life that we're blessed to live. I think that this is a great opportunity for people to change habits, kind of create new habits, and maybe eliminate some of the distractions. I mean, we all know that there's so many distractions in this world. I mean, between social media and email and phone calls and text messages and television, it's an opportunity to kind of cut some of that out of your life and refocus on what really matters.
Yes, and it is without question an opportunity to gain the most exhilarating and rewarding leadership experience of your entire life.
Couldn't agree more, Jan.
And with that, I would like to say, Nick Norris, thank you very much for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, my dear.
If you'd enjoyed this podcast and found something of value that will help you on your authentic leadership journey, then please support Nick and the SEAL community. Please visit the C4 Foundation website at www.c4foundation.org. Nick personally served with Charles Keating IV at SEAL Team 3, and his memory lives on through the mission of the C4 Foundation. The C4 Foundation is actively engaged in building a sanctuary for active duty SEAL families to strengthen the support structure that will be there for our warriors during the decades of global combat ahead.